The story begins where narrator said that people can be separated into three different groups: heroes, ordinary people, and villains. However, not all the heroes are well known, and ordinary people are not always regular. Therefore, no one can say they're terrible just because someone is a villain. The story begins when four people find themselves in a room. They wonder how they reach this place. One of them says, "For now, don't be flustered. Calm down," as they need to remain composed to find a way to move outside. But a yellow-haired guy shouts and grabs that person and blames him for having kidnapped all of them. That person pushes him back and introduces himself as Kim Chang-seok. He says he is unsure what is happening here and that he also just woke up a while ago like the rest of them. He requests not to come up with useless speculations. But the yellow-haired man says what a load of crap, he is telling them to believe that. Then, another person introduces himself as Seonghoon. A girl introduces herself as Yumina. The yellow-haired man says his name is Shin Pilseob. Suddenly, they all see something weird. Everyone sees a window that says quest in front of them. Kim Chang-seok says he thinks they all should discuss what is going on. Shin Pilseob becomes furious that Chang-seok is suddenly trying to be the leader. But Mina calms him down and says it is more important to grasp the situation rather than arguing about something like that. Seonghoon also asks him to be a little quiet. Suddenly, they all see people whom evil spirits have possessed. The status window shows them a quest, which says rank is a tutorial. They all have to survive, massacre, and escape. They have to complete the quest. They are also informed about the achievement conditions. Survival will be completed if they survive in the building for a day or are the last remaining survivors. Then, the massacre will be completed if they kill all the people possessed by evil spirits. And lastly, escape will be completed if they escape through the exit that may or may not exist. Seonghoon says they should not panic in a situation like this and that this is not the time to fight amongst themselves. They need to block that door first, which is in front of them, and say if those evil people break the door there, it will become difficult to handle. But one man enters and Chang-seok says everyone should hold something. It's just one guy. They will be able to kill him if they go at him all at once. They look around for weapons. On the other side, two people are monitoring the whole situation through cameras. One of them is an old man who says these people are pretty unique. The other one says that the blonde person is Shin Pilseob, who woke up the earliest out of the four, and he also figured out most of the system first. However, he acted like he was still unconscious like the rest of the people afterward. He did not tell anyone about the system's existence as the status and skill windows, even though he figured it out first. An old man laughs and says that Pilseob is a cunning person. This is fun, very fun. They also observed that Kim Chang-seok was also surprising. He had a skill from the start. An old man says skills are common, but his skill rank is high. It is extremely rare for someone to have a skill with proficiency above B rank as soon as they start. They say thanks to that man there, they could all escape their confusion and move around. Even though a person possessed by an evil spirit with a fierce skill activated is also there. They say it seems like they all have cleared the first tutorial. But they are all shocked to see that Seonghoon is killing others. Seonghoon says no matter how much he thinks about it, this seems to be the only way for him to survive. He kills 3 of the others and says this is a nightmare. Seonghoon is congratulated through his status window for clearing the tutorial quest Survive, Massacre, Escape. He has been chosen as a player of the great game to select the following god's successor, the mission. Jerry comes to meet him in the start room. He introduces himself as Seonghoon's supporter and tells him this world is the mission. A vast stage made by the gods to select a god's successor. The longer one survives in the mission world, the higher one's chances of being selected as the successor of a high-ranking god. Seonghoon thinks this is not the world he knows. He says this is a common setting he'd see in a fantasy novel. When he confirms it from Jerry, Jerry says this is correct. It would also be familiar to him if he had played games before. It is similar to games, but the one difference is that death exists here, and the only way to leave this world is to die or to become a god, Jerry tells him further. Seonghoon says that means he cannot make it back alive. Jerry asks him not to worry as he can revive once after dying. Therefore, he has 2 lives. Seonghoon thinks Jerry is shamelessly telling him not to worry, but if there are 2 lives, then the 3 he killed in the tutorial will also be alive. He then asks Jerry if he can heal his wound. Jerry says yes, that's not a problem. When Jerry heals his wound, he feels this bastard has earned the title of traitor just through the tutorial. After healing, Jerry says he will give Seonghoon time to prepare before his actual battle. He tells Seonghoon he will have a tutorial reward if he checks his inventory. He may use that reward to purchase a few items or skills for the battle. 3 hours later, Jerry says Seonghoon is browsing with no end in sight. Finally, he has purchased the lowest grade swordsmanship, the 3 foundation sword technique, and the low grade inventory. Jerry says he even bought the inventory, which is quite expensive. He does not hold back at all. When Seonghoon selects food and camping facilities, Jerry says this guy knows what he needs in the long run. Seonghoon also selects the shock magic book instead of a high rank skill, which is an excellent choice for the mission, where survival is essential. When Seonghoon finished preparing, Jerry asked him to go to the actual battle. There, Jerry asks him to kill a dog first. When Seonghoon says sorry for this, Jerry says if he kills this dog, his actual battle will be over, and he can rest. Of course, the dog will not resist. Seonghoon says he has already killed 3 people anyone, so this is not a problem for him. Soon, he killed the dog too. After that, Jerry says it is good to see that he did not waste time and then asks him to rest. But he refuses and says he will continue practicing. Seonghoon says this was his chance to practice his skills before attending the mission. He has killed over 100 dogs, horses, cows, other gigantic animals, and even goblins, lizardmen, and orcs. He says once he became more familiar with the sword, the mission, he would finally start properly with Jerry's last advice: please value his life. Later, he comes to another strange place, where he sees many people. He says there is no time to waste here, he must hurry. The world of the mission has already started. He is sure that there is a supporter like Jerry somewhere. Soon, a girl welcomes him and says thanks for being the first visitor to the first city mission station and named him Player Nim. She tells him players cannot leave the city, but he can receive quests from the mission station to carry them out. Since he is a beginner, he can receive quests like wiping out rat infestations. Seonghoon says it has quests too. It looks like it is a game with his life on the line. Though the reward is not very good, there is something called the first clear bonus. Even if this is a game, there are no levels or tips on increasing his stats. This is very impolite. He says it would be more beneficial to monopolize the stat points to increase his stats as quickly as possible. He then tells the girl that he has agreed to take that quest. She says he has started the quest to wipe out the rat infestation, so he is migrating to the mission location. While going there, he thinks wiping a few rats should not take long. He soon realizes he cannot catch them when he reaches there because they are so small and quick. Furthermore, he says he was not told how to drop out of a quest. That means he cannot leave this shed if he doesn't finish the quest. He then starts eating food and says it's good that he bought food beforehand, or he would have died of starvation while trying to kill the rats. Afterward, he uses low-grade poison to kill the rats. In return, that girl at the city mission station congratulates him on wiping out all the rats and says he is a fantastic man. The other people wonder, appreciate him for clearing the quest, and say he is too fast. But Seonghoon feels it annoying that she is trying to say it loud enough to grab everyone's attention. But he smiles and says nothing good will come out of getting angry at her. He is stopped by a man and a girl who just heard that he completed the quest to wipe out the rats and says they need some information about this. Seonghoon turns towards them and asks about the man's title. That boy says his title is the Brave Survivor. Seonghoon says that guy seems like a trustworthy person based on his title. Since the title he received was Traitor, he thinks it would be good to make acquaintances with them in the future. Seonghoon asks them not to do the quest to wipe out the rats if possible. He says he would not recommend it if they are not prepared enough. Few other people arrive there and say they would do the quest to wipe out the rats. Seonghoon calls them idiots, and he then requests the girl to please give him the wolf hunt quest. On the other side, those asking about the rat quest earlier decide to do the pest extermination quest. They ask Seonghoon if he would like to do party play. That boy says he and his girlfriend did the tutorial together, and according to the people here, it is possible to do quests through party play. But Seonghoon rejects his offer and says he is going to hunt alone. Then he arrives at his quest spot, where he sees his first hunt and says he will deal with it now. He draws out his sword and attacks the wolf. After some time, he realizes that it is still a wolf even if it gets hurt. He then uses his shock skill and says this is pretty useful. That wolf got injured, but at that moment, another wolf came and bit him on his shoulder. He fails to pull out his sword from first wolf's body and fights with the other wolf without a sword. He then uses the lowest grade poison arts and low grade trap installation skills to deal with wolves. Based on the experience he gained from the quest to wipe out the rats, he created a synergy between poison and traps by fusing the skills, and as a result, he was able to kill 30 wolves alone. The status window informs him that he has cleared the hunt for ailed wolves. Then he returns to the mission station. The girls congratulate him and say he has cleared the quest as the first player again. She inquires if he is all right. Seonghoon instead asks her if she knows where an inn is. She says he can find an inn if he goes straight towards the left from the city square. When he arrives, the shopkeeper asks him to show how much money he has. He says there are a lot of bastards who try to defraud them, so he must show his money first. When Seonghoon shows his money, the shopkeeper says it is more than enough and asks him to enter. The waitress asks for the food. He says he will have bulgogi and a rice bowl. Then he sees his status window. All his stats have passed 10. He says with this, his physical stats are above average. His degree of mastery of skills has also increased to C. Those two people also arrive there and offer him a play party. That boy says what a coincidence, who knew they would meet again here. Remarkably, they came across each other like this again. He asks Seonghoon if they can sit with him here. Seonghoon allows them. They ask about his name. When Seonghoon introduced himself, that man said his name was Lee Youngi, and his girlfriend's name was Park Hannah. They thank him as they could avoid a rough situation just because of him. Seonghoon says he has not heard about a rough situation or what happened behind him. They say they will tell him all their information, but he has to give them a good meal. Seonghoon thinks although it is unexpected, it would not be wrong if he could sit down and hear some good information just by buying them a small meal worth a few guilds. So he tells them he will offer them a meal worth 100 guilds for both. They became so happy and started telling him the details. They say, firstly, after eliminating the pests, there have been multiple riots all over the city. There's no way people would be sane after being suddenly thrown into a strange world. Soldiers arrived to suppress the riots shortly afterward. They dragged people who continued to resist somewhere, and the riots ended with some casualties. However, the dead people came back to life, so there was another uproar. Seonghoon remembers that Jerry said that everyone had 2 lives. Then Lee Youngi says the second piece of information is related to the first, which is the death penalty. After a few minutes, the resurrected people said all their stats were reduced by 3. Seonghoon says it means if someone has 6 stats, then his stats reduced by 18 if he dies once. This is enormous. The third piece of information is about the area around the square. There are several mission stations, armories, restaurants, inns, grocery stores, and some places called the Class Change Temple. Seonghoon says he already got an additional title after hunting for the whole day. He asks if he can gain more skills if he changes classes. Then Lee and Park thank Seonghoon for eliminating pests because of him and tell him that most people who went to catch the rats did not return. Seonghoon says the rat-catching quest is challenging not because the rats themselves are strong, but because it is hard to catch them. He says he would have collapsed if he had not brought enough food. Then their food is served. Lee and Park become happy to see the food. Seonghoon says he will buy food for both of them daily. In exchange, they will continue to provide him with information like this. He thinks 6,000 guilds per month of food costs for 2 people is pretty expensive, but he won't have to spend time gathering information. Lee agrees and says they will do that. Later, when Seonghoon comes out of the inn, he sees a few beggars who request to give them even just 1 penny. Seonghoon sees these beggars as those who went on the rats capturing quest. He says they all started the same way, but because they made the wrong choice, they fell behind after being unable to adapt to the world of the mission. He calls them worthless beggars and moves from there. While moving, he hits one of them, who feels brutally hit and says that bastard is going around hitting people. Seonghoon says if it was an ordinary or good-willed person, they would have felt sorry and apologized under the intimidation of other people's gazes. He had also concealed his inner evil in the past and bowed his head, pretending to be excellent. He says, but he has never had good-willed emotions from the start. He only lived his life concealing his true self. He says beggars, if they are hungry, must do something about it, and do not raise their voice if they do not want to die. The next day, he comes to the Temple of Class Change. A person named Philip welcomes him and introduces himself as a creation made to help players. Seonghoon says he wants to ask something, and Philip allows him. He then says the swordsman, thief, and magician classes have already appeared in his status window. So is there a difference between a class that appears automatically and one that he can get from here? Philip is shocked to hear that it's been 2 days at most in the world of the mission, but he's already received 3 classes. He says now that he thinks about it, he is wearing a coat unlike others. He then speaks up and says his question answers that the classes that he has received are temporary classes, dependent on the weapons that he uses. A temporary class is, like the name suggests, a class that can change at any time. If he uses an axe for a time, axeman will appear instead of swordsman, and if he only uses magic, only magician will be left. However, the classes offered at the Temple of Class Change cannot be changed. Simply put, it is not choosing a class but developing a player's characteristics. When Seonghoon asks what characteristics mean, Philip says it is better to see it once instead of explaining it 100 times. He then showed him a screen where different characteristics were mentioned. He says at the Temple of Class Change, they create a class by combining a player's experiences. When Seonghoon says that the recommended classes are more potent than basic classes, Philip says they might be and might not be. Moreover, he says the cost of selecting a class is 50,000 guilds. If Seonghoon has money, he can change it at any time. Seonghoon thinks there would be profit in this, so he would select Swordsman and Righteous Outlaw, both of which are pretty good. The status window tells him he cannot use cowardly methods after choosing a Righteous Outlaw. He says he does not like that phrase. He does not know precisely what cowardly methods entail, and it could be harmful if he cannot use traps or poison. He says he does not have a choice, so he tells Philip that he wants to change his class to Swordsman. Philip says okay, that will cost 50,000 guilds. Seonghoon gives him the whole money. Philip congratulates him on walking the path of a swordsman. His stats have increased by 3. His proficiency in skills has increased slightly. The status window tells he has learned the exclusive swordsman skills of driving steps and a never-ending spirit of inquiry. The ability stats have risen by a total of 18. The new additional skills will come in handy as well. Seonghoon comes out of the temple, and while going back, he wonders what effect the driving steps will have. He feels 2 people are gazing at him. They look skilled as they have equipment. Suddenly, he sees a man stop a girl passing there. He held her hand, and she asked him to let her go. But when the man did not release her arm, she broke his arm. She warns him to keep blocking the path if he wants to live with one arm. Seonghoon knows she used the spite effect to make the opponent tremble with fear. They may suffer a fatal blow. A person says to him that he can use his head somewhat. Seonghoon asks what he means. That man says do not feign ignorance. Judging by his clothes and sword, he must have played an especially active role in the tutorial quest. Also, the fact that he just came out of the Temple of Class Change means he has already managed to change classes. That person says his title is Leader, and then asks Seonghoon about his title. Seonghoon thinks if he says that his title is Betrayer or Cowardly Survivor, everyone around him will be suspicious of him. So he says it's nothing extraordinary, and his title is Courageous Survivor. That person says his name is Kang Muhan and asks Seonghoon if he wants to move together with them. Seonghoon asks about the benefits of moving together. Muhan says if he goes with them, he will gain trustworthy teammates and he can receive financial support. And with that, he can get protection from a strong guy like himself. When Seonghoon asks about the strong guy, Muhan laughs and says his strength stat is 50. He further says that when he came here, it gauged his abilities in reality and the number changed. So, someone like him had their strength measured at a high level. Seonghoon sees his status window and says even with the bonus from changing classes, his strength is only 20. He then declines Muhan's offer and says he wants to move alone. Muhan says if he ever changes his mind, come to find Hedefa. He will be treated well. Seonghoon knows if he wants to raise his abilities, he has to go through quests quickly. To afford this city's costs, he must raise the difficulty level and get more rewards. He comes to the mission station, where he sees that girl who broke the arm earlier. Both of them demand for the sick orc opponent. The girl at reception asks the girl to move to the relevant place. Seonghoon says he also needs a sick orc opponent and is asked to go to that place. While going there, he says it is the same difficulty as Slayer. On the other side, in the forest, two orcs see food in the middle of a forest and say it is too suspicious. Seonghoon has placed foot there. He wants to trap them. He comes out and attacks them. They cried and said it was a human. Seonghoon knows the orc that Jerry had summoned in the start room was, to some degree, Jerry's summon. There was no way the real deal would be the same. Suddenly, he realizes his practice techniques are not working. He thinks about using the new technique. The orc says he will die if he can't think. Seonghoon thought orcs were the stupid and lowest grade monsters. He uses his shock technique. He thought he could take two of them on at once since they were sick orcs, but they only staggered a little after getting directly hit by shock. Orc says he is a weak human. He also knows he will lose at this rate. He does not have many skills he can use in this situation. Among them, low-grade swordsmanship had an effect. He says that Jungle Blade would cut him down if he used the lowest grade hand-to-hand combat arts. He has two active skills since shock did not work on them. Now he is left with only one skill, driving steps. He then uses that skill and kills one of the orcs. The orc says it is unbelievable that his fellow was killed by that bastard who was on the verge of collapse. When Seonghoon approached the remaining orc, the orc observed his entire body shaking. He must have used up all his stamina after blocking the first orc attacks. He becomes confident that he won't be able to block his attack when he is exhausted. But suddenly Seonghoon disappeared in front of him. He looked around in search of him. But Seonghoon appears on his back and attacks him from behind. Soon, this orc will also be killed by Seonghoon. After that, Seonghoon admits he underestimated them and almost lost his first life in vain. The lowest clear condition of the quest is to kill 3 orcs. He could just leave after killing one more, but that would be a waste of possible clear rewards. He says he almost died from just one orc, so he must accumulate more battle experience. On the other hand, the head of orc was informed that scouts had not yet returned. Until now, 14 orcs are missing. Their leader says this is the work of humans. He orders those who can move to grab their weapons and gather up. One says most are sick with a high fever and cannot move. The leader says that is why they must take care of this quickly. They cannot wait to be killed by humans in their beds after the spread of the disease gets worse. The other orc says he will gather everyone immediately. He also says that humans who meddled with the Crimson Feather orcs will pay the price for their actions. He promises to take revenge on his fellows and says he will stick that human's head on a spike, cut his limbs into pieces, and feed it to the beasts. On the other side, 2 more orcs who are also sick are being forced to scout the area. They see many bushes and leaves placed in a place. When they reach there, they fall. They understand it is a trap and have fallen into it. Seonghoon appears there and attacks them. He says it would be harmful to face 7 orcs at once, but this much is manageable. He believed he could win against 2 orcs if he used driving steps as best. He made a strategy to face orcs to some extent without using skills. He says now he is getting stronger. He then uses driving steps to attack the orc, who says his comrades around the area will not let this go. When Seonghoon asks him to bring his comrades, he rushes back to bring them. But Seonghoon follows that orc and asks him to tell him where the group is. He then kills the orc and moves on. Now he believes that he will have no problems clearing this quest. His inventory is filled with weapons he took from the orcs. He has just been taking their tusks since he does not know the most expensive part. At full magic power, he can use chalk 6 times and driving steps 4 times. He says he will have no problems facing 2 orcs at once if he uses his skills actively. Now 14 more orcs are left to clear the quest. He decides to hurry up, as he fears that that black-haired woman will take away the first-time clear bonus after this much effort. Soon, he reaches the sick orcs' village. He feels the village is too quiet. No orcs are passing by or standing guard. He feels some bad smell. When he goes there, he sees some orcs are so sick that they can't move. The orcs he had fought earlier also had a red rash on their skin, but these guys have it worse. He says he can complete the quest faster than he thought. When he attacks sick orcs, they request for help. But he says sorry he can't help them, as they are just a lump of meat for him. He says he will at least show them some mercy and kill them quickly. After killing them, the total number of killed orcs reaches 29, and just 1 more is remaining now to clear the quest. On the other side, the orcs who came out of the village for scouting come back and see a human's trace. They ask the others to check the surroundings to find that human. Seonghoon also sees them and curses himself as he is so absorbed in it that he does not notice them approaching. The orcs' leader becomes furious that a mere human entered their village while they were out scouting. He says he should have left some guards, but he could not think of it due to his illness. Seonghoon says if the orc leader was in normal condition, then he would have noticed the smell of blood coming from the shed. But right now, he is just a sick orc. When the leader reaches him, he attacks him. The leader warns him not to underestimate him, as he is the elder and uses the skill of firing arrows. Seonghoon uses his skill of driving steps. He could picture the acrobatic movements that dodged the arrows by a narrow margin in his head. It was because he could see the movement path of the high difficulty skill fire arrow. However, because his physical ability and experience were lacking, he lost his balance. When he falls, the orc elder laughs and says he will make sure to kill him by burning him in the fire. But Seonghoon stands up right then and says unfortunately he has a passive skill that is always active. He uses the skill of lowest grade magical resistance, which helps to resist the power of magic. He says normally he would have received continuous damage from the fire on his shoulder, but thanks to magical resistance, it was put out after burning for a bit. The elder is shocked to see how this human resists his magic. When Seonghoon soon kills the elder, other orcs shout at him and say they will not forgive him. Seonghoon's status window tells him he has fulfilled the sick orc slaughter condition. He says it looks like he was the fastest one. Driving step skills were unexpectedly very helpful. It looks like its effect will improve as skill increases so that he will put all his bonus stats into dexterity. In the end, he also got the orc elder's wand. The wand is made of regular sticks. It's been imbued with magic power for a long time. It helps to reduce the magic power consumption rate by 1% upon activating a skill. He says it is only 1%. It is better than nothing. When he returns to the city mission station, he sees that the black-haired is also there. He decides to take another mission since he is not at his limit. He tells the receptionist Sarah that he will take this Ratman elimination quest. That black-haired girl also decides to take the Ratman elimination quest. Sarah asks them to move toward the elimination mission location right away. Later, when they arrive at the mission location, many Ratmen appear there. When the girl encounters the Ratman feels his abilities are lesser than this human's, so it is better to retreat now. But that girl uses flying swordsmanship skills to attack him and kill him. Then she thinks the wand Seonghoon was holding was the wand of the orc elder. It probably means he cleared it on Slayer difficulty. She thinks that Seonghoon might be stronger than her. But that girl did not use traps or slay helpless opponents like Seonghoon. She took on 30 sick orcs head-on and crushed them all. The status window tells her name as Myrini. She has acquired 3 skills since the start of the mission. She possesses intermediate grade swordsmanship, flying swordsmanship, and life-ending swordsmanship. This power surpassed the special forces. When she thinks of all her abilities, she believes there is no way that Guy is stronger than her. She says rather than the impression of an influential person, she got the impression of someone rude. On the other side, Seonghoon, also fighting with Ratman, feels his ears itchy, which means someone is talking about him. It is believed that itching of ears means someone is talking about that person. He then uses his poison technique to kill the remains. Later, when he returns to the mission station, Sarah tells him he also cleared this quest so fast this time. However, this time, player Myrini managed to clear it first. Seonghoon thinks increasing the pace of poison and traps may be unreasonable. A shopkeeper at the miscellaneous goods store NPC Julu asks him to tell him if something terrible happened to him. He says if Seonghoon takes away the price of the goods bought from the cost of 23,000 guilds, it'd be 15,000 guilds. The title NPC might have been controversial at the beginning of the game, but it is a widely accepted term nowadays. As much as the Almighty created them, they were the same as humans and had their personalities. 2 months after the start of the first mission, 3 ranks of people existed within the first city, much like a game. Hungry people who had to sell basic things to eat, the poor. Those who were neither solid nor weak were normal, and the class of those with extraordinary talents, ranker. Although they had the same unique class as the top rankers held absolute power. Seonghoon then comes to the bookstore, where the shopkeeper says he has finally prepared enough money to buy a skill. He asks her to hand him over the skill book. Intermediate grade swordsmanship specialization, 50,000 guilds. Intermediate grade poisoning, 30,000 guilds. This book costs 80,000 guilds, the shopkeeper tells him. Seonghoon says he has spent around 90% of his assets, but from now on, he can unleash the long blade swordsmanship. He thinks whether he would be able to beat the ranker Myrini with this. In the past, he lost the first clear bonus for Slayer difficulty of Moonlit Cave Investigation to Myrini. Myrini received the Moonlit Long Spear from the first clear reward and sold it to Kang Muhan for 2 million guilds. From that day, to catch up to Myrini, he decided to try the Moonlit Investigation again. Later, while wandering, he found someone announcing she was looking for someone to attempt the Moonlit Cave Investigation mission with him. Seonghoon comes near her and asks about the open positions for the Moonlit Cave Investigation. He is told that warriors, archers, thieves, and magicians are available. The front line is lacking, so they are waiting to get a warrior. That girl is surprised to see Seonghoon's personality and thinks an old coat and a normal longsword, which Seonghoon is carrying, do not show he has a high class. Then she tells him that the Moonlit mission might seem on the more accessible side, but it is undeniably a C-grade mission. When she asks about Seonghoon's skills, she is shown an indication of the soul. An indication of soul means a certificate to show others about stats. Because it is something a person earns by donating money at the Temple of Class Change, it is impossible to falsify. When that girl admires his stats and says these are on the level of a ranker, Seonghoon says no, he received these stats by fate from a mission, and they rose greatly. His equipment is very much lacking. That woman is shocked to hear he earned stats by fate. By fate means hidden items and additional stats that can be earned semi-permanently during a mission. She then introduced herself as Sung Ah-hyun and asked Seonghoon to follow her. When they reach their destination, Sung Ah-hyun tells her fellow Dongcheol that she found a warrior whose strength is over 50 and his dexterity is over 80. Dongcheol is shocked to hear this all and says this warrior is possibly a ranker. Sung Ah-hyun says no, he got stats by fate and got stronger. Dongcheol then welcomes Seonghoon to his group. Seonghoon says that Dongcheol looks older than him, so he will call him Hyang Nim. Dongcheol says he can call him whatever he wants, then shows him an axe and says, "Look at it, it is so cool." Seonghoon says, "Wow, it looks cumbersome, but he must be as strong as he looks." Dongcheol laughs and says of course he is pretty strong. He then introduced himself to other group members and said that the woman who brought him there was Sung Ah-hyun as they greeted each other. Next, the person sitting stealthily by the wall is Aura, and he is a thief. Then he also introduces a white-haired woman sitting there as a magician, the famous Ranker. Seonghoon says he thought there were only Koreans here, but it looks like the woman is a foreigner. The magician meets him, says it's a pleasure to meet him, and asks him to call her Ellie. Seonghoon knows that even among rankers, magicians were a rarity. Because the magic skill books were so expensive, they were much harder to grow. He thinks that, including him, there are 2 in the front, 1 sub and 2 rear guards, which means this group is not a bit dangerous. Dongcheol tells him that the Moonlit Cave Investigation is super easy. If the number of people increases, then one should have to share the rewards, so this is better. All members said it was fine. If it was this party, they were enough to clear it. Seonghoon thinks, of course, that he knows since he was the one who spread the rumor that Moonlit Cave's investigation was easy. He purposely sold the cave map and spread the method of the quest, because he had a different goal in mind. Later, they all move towards the location of the Moonlit Cave investigation. They are informed that werewolves have gathered in the Moonlit Cave on an unnamed hill. Their task is to defeat the werewolves and investigate why they gathered there. Dongcheol asks Seonghoon to calm down and tells him monsters do not appear right from the start. Since the werewolves only appear once people enter the Moonlit Cave, so everyone can relax until then. Seonghoon says okay and thinks as they seem relaxed, it means they must have been here several times. Dongcheol asks Miss Ellie if she is afraid she can use his arm, but Sung Ah-hyun stops him. She asks them to head into the Moonlit Cave now. She asks everyone to hurry up. Seonghoon tells Miss Ellie that the path is very steep, so she should be careful. Moreover, since she is a magician, her stamina must be low. But she says she is alright. Seonghoon then asks her to hurry and grab onto him. They will be separated from others at this rate. She then grabs his hand. Seonghoon knows she is very valuable if she is a ranker, especially since she is a magician, so it won't hurt to make a good impression. Also, she is incredibly attractive. Because the moonlit cave contains various kinds of ores with unique properties, people describe their experience of being in the cave as having entered a night sky filled with stars. Suddenly, Aora asks everyone to stop and says there is a trap. An essential skill of a thief is to detect hidden traps. Seonghoon can also see it clearly with his intermediate grade trap detection skill. Later, Aora informs them he has disassembled the trap so they can advance. Seonghoon says it looks like he has at least an intermediate grade trap disassembly skill. He thinks since his disassembly is intermediate grade, his detection skill is intermediate grade too. He says that considering most people's skills are still of low grade, it is surprising that Aora has intermediate grade skills, so he should be wary of him. He then asks Miss Ellie if she is a ranker. She says she is not sure herself, but others say she is a ranker. He says she is fantastic. If she is a ranker, she must be very strong. He also says he is amazed whenever he sees the top rankers. Top rankers are like the skies above the skies. In other words, they are genuinely heavenly existences. Two of the most representative top rankers include the one who completed the C-rank Moonlit Cave investigation by herself, the demonic sword Myrine, and the one who possesses a high-grade spearmanship, the Spear King Kang Muhan. Using the fame of Hetafa, which he made himself, he became even more famous. He thinks then that Ellie cannot afford to be confident simply because of her status as a ranker. He then asks her if magician rankers are rare, so she would be the top among the magicians. She appreciates his praise, but says she is not really that great. Suddenly, Dongcheol asks everyone to come quickly as the werewolves are here. He asks them not to attack them. Only he and Seonghoon will care for them. Seonghoon thinks he is doing this because he wants to preserve as much strength as possible at the beginning or to show off his skill. But he decides to play along for now. Then they attack werewolves who have high physical stats, but their attack patterns are simple and their range is short. Seonghoon says he went all in on his dexterity stat, so dodging this is nothing. While they are fighting, other fellows are observing them keenly. Sung Ah-hyun tells Ellie that Seonghoon is handling a werewolf with such ease, showing he is also a ranker with those skills. Seonghoon knows they are talking about him. He already knows that anyone can be expected to stab a person in the back in a world like The Mission, so he was planning to fight while hiding his skills. He got too absorbed in fighting because of his newly acquired intermediate grade swordsmanship specialization skill. Dongcheol uses the Power Step skill, an active skill that drastically increases damage by instantaneously increasing physical ability. After completing his target, he sees Seonghoon is still fighting. Miss Ellie thanked him for his hard work. He says this much is nothing, then turns towards Seonghoon and asks him why he is dragging out a fight with a werewolf for so long. Seonghoon says this because he has not learned any active skills. Everyone is shocked to hear that he has no such active skill. Skills are mainly divided up into two categories. Active skills, which a person has to activate, and passive skills, which are always active. People have active and passive skills at a 3:7 ratio, but since even the lowest grade active skill among the warriors adds 30% damage, everyone has at least one or two active skills. Dongcheol asks how it is possible that he does not have a single active skill. Seonghoon says he is sorry, he could not learn any because they were too expensive. Though fortunately, his stats are high by fate. Dongcheol says indeed, there are shallow wounds all over the werewolf's body, but there is no fatal wound. This also shows he lacks a solid attack because he has no active skills. He becomes furious at Seonghoon, but then thinks and says she would have beaten him if he were any other user, but this guy's stats are ranked grade. Moreover, unlike those who only rely on skills, he has basic combat skills. He then asks them to move ahead, and Seonghoon apologizes to him. On their way, Dongcheol asks Sung Ah-hyun what she thinks about Seonghoon. She says in terms of instantaneous power, Dongcheol is better. However, in terms of average combat ability, Seonghoon is better. She thinks he can restrain around 4 werewolves if he tries. They see another werewolf and Ellie is asked to show his magic. She uses Ice Spear skill to stop that werewolf. Other members also come to kill that werewolf. Soon, Dongcheol says it will be over. There is nothing to worry about, so keep going. While going, Seonghoon asks the thief about his dagger-throwing skill and says this skill is unique. But the thief says he should not ask things like that to anyone. Seonghoon says sorry and says he was just curious because he threw so much better than that thief he already knows. Then the thief tells him it is a low grade, but he has been practicing throwing daggers. Seonghoon then asks Dongcheol what time it will take to clear the mission as their team is very good. Then the thief Ilwoo says they all should go to slaughter difficulty. But Sung Ah-hyun says that would be a bit too hard. They must kill the moon wolf and solve the moonlit caves mystery. Seonghoon says to be very honest, if they clear this dungeon on adventurer difficulty, they would divide the rewards between the 5 of them. He also says that clearing a D-grade mission would be better than that. Dongcheol says that is true, but it can be a bit dangerous. But Ilwoo says it would not necessarily be dangerous. Since Seonghoon fills the role of 2 average warriors and Ellie uses powerful magic, they can fulfill the conditions of the slaughterer's difficulty. Dongcheol says that although he says it is true, he does not feel like taking that risk, so it is better to go up to hunter difficulty. Ilwoo then moves to do it, saying 3 low-grade reinforcement stones are among the slaughterer's difficulty rewards, so he will give up on it. Seonghoon thinks that a low-grade reinforcement stone is currently worth 100,000 guilds, and people don't give up on such benefits so quickly, so why is this thief Ilwoo? He becomes curious about it. He then asks Ilwoo why he wants to clear the slaughter difficulty severely. Ilwoo says that he is trying to go through his first awakening. He is trying to change to a higher class, but the condition is that he has to clear 3 C-grade missions at slaughterer difficulty. Dongcheol says so, that is why he thinks of giving up on rewards to awaken. Then he says right and moves to clear it up to the slaughterer's difficulty. He also says that safety comes first, so Seonghoon will continue to restrain them as he has been doing, and Ellie can use her magic whenever she feels that the situation is terrible. He says they have cleared the moonlit cave at the slaughterer's difficulty before, so they know the way and ask the thief to ensure he disassembles the traps correctly. After assigning tasks to everyone, he orders them to move forward. Seonghoon thinks as Ilwoo said he is doing for his first awakening. He suspects Ilwoo is telling the truth. After some time, Dongcheol says the monster that can be considered the intermediate boss of the moonlit cave will appear. He asks if anyone knows about them. Ilwoo says he is talking about a black werewolf. Dongcheol says that means Ilwoo has done his research and also informs them once they disassemble the next trap, a large carven will appear. There will be 5 werewolves and 1 black werewolf in there. 5 werewolves are no problem, but the black werewolf is quite strong. He further says it is stronger than 3 werewolves combined. Seonghoon says that he will take care of the black werewolf. Dongcheol can't believe what he said and asks him if he would do that. He also says he is glad that Seonghoon stepped up. Seonghoon says he has no skills to deal a fatal blow, but he can restrain him at the least. Dongcheol appreciates him and says he already knows how skilled Seonghoon is. Now hold it back and nothing more. He says now only the werewolves are remaining. He will take care of 2, then Ilwoo will take care of the remaining 3. Ellie says she will take care of them with her magic. She further says she will take down one of them as soon as they enter the cavern. Seonghoon will care for the black werewolf and Dongcheol will care for the 2 werewolves. So she, Ilwoo and Miss Ah-hyun will take care of the remaining 2. Dongcheol says if that's the case, the fight would be much more bearable if one is down from the start. After some time, when they see werewolves, Ellie starts her magic. He shows fireball skills. Dongcheol says things are going as planned. Seonghoon soon kills one of the werewolves and then moves towards the next. He fights with the black werewolf. He says someone could use his skill without speaking if his proficiency was high enough. He guessed it was true. He should be able to chant without drawing any attention now. Later, Sung Ah-hyun appreciates him because he takes down the black werewolf by himself. She also says Dongcheol can about take on one, but Seonghoon took it down the quickest. He suspects he could be a real ranker. Seonghoon curses himself for drawing so much attention and says he should not be drawing attention like this. He then says that the fireball Ellie fired had indirectly damaged it, because if that did not work, he would not have taken him down. Dongcheol and Ah-hyun then turn towards Ellie and appreciate her for her incredible magic. Ilwoo says that everyone is hungry, so he will cook the food, and after eating the food, they should rest up before they head off. Dongcheol and Ah-hyun become happy to hear this and say it means Ilwoo is carrying around ingredients in his inventory, which is fantastic. When Ilwoo cooks food, Ah-hyun says it smells incredible so that she will eat up. Ilwoo says there is plenty of food, so eat up as much. When Seonghoon starts eating, his skills detect an intermediate-grade poison in the food. He says that as someone tries to poison other fellows, it cannot be Park Dongcheol or Sung Ah-hyun, so it could be that bastard Ilwoo. Ellie asks him what is wrong with him as he stops eating. He says nothing happened to him, and the food tastes good. He stopped because it just got caught in his throat. Ah-hyun and Dongcheol enjoy the food thoroughly. Seonghoon knows this world is like a game, but it is so different from one another. One might think that if he has any status abnormalities, it would appear on his status window, but just like his intermediate-grade poisoning, countless skills can fool the system. If a person does not have any way to combat such skills, then the victim would not even know what hits them. He says it does not matter, even if nobody else made a move, as they all have poisoned anyway. The antidote has neutralized the poison. He says they all had a hearty meal, so everyone must take heart and move forward. Ellie asks which way they should go, as there is a fork in the road. Dongcheol says there are no monsters on the left, but there are a ton of traps, and it is really hard to navigate. The last time they went there, they were lost. Ah-hyun says that is why they should go to the right. Dongcheol also says since 2 or 3 werewolves come in a pack on the right, they will be able to take them on just fine. Ellie also says it will all be over once they take down the awakening moon wolf. They again start their journey. Soon, Seonghoon tells them the ceiling is about to collapse, so run quickly. Otherwise, they all will be crushed. Seonghoon says it will be impossible to traverse this path now. He was tired of acting, so this is great. Dongcheol starts coughing and also asks everyone if they are alright. He tells Ilwoo it was a trap and asks why he did not see it. Ilwoo says he did not think there would be a trap like this. Suddenly, they realize Seonghoon is not here, and they worry about him that he might get stuck there. Ilwoo says it seems it was a one-time trap and apologizes for his negligence. Dongcheol shouts at him and says a comrade of them has died, and he thinks saying sorry is just enough. Ellie asks them to calm down and says Seonghoon's dexterity was high, so he should have been able to dodge. They also managed to dodge it, so there is no way he died from something like this. Dongcheol says that Seonghoon will go through the path on the left and meet them at the boss's room. Ah-hyun says there are a lot of traps on the left path, so it will be hard to get to the boss's room. Dongcheol says it is a little worrying, but they should be able to take it down alone. There are only 20 left for the quest. He orders them to move forward and says they will start after Ellie launches a fireball. When she launches a fireball, they hear the roar of the werewolf. The status window tells that due to the Moonlit Cave's boss awakening the moon wolf's strong roar, all stats will drop by 10%. They feel something weird happened with their powers. The arrow feels heavier than usual. Miss Ellie gets some injury. Ilwoo stabs Ellie and Ah-hyun and says normally one would have to spin his sword around after stabbing someone, but it might break, so this will have to be enough. He also says since they were stabbed with a poison-coated blade, it will take at least half a day for them to wake up. He then turns towards Dongcheol and says they should wrap things up now. He hits Dongcheol, who also gets injured, and calls him a backstabbing bitch. He asks Ilwoo if somebody ordered him to do this. He replied that he did not feel like they were worth using, so he investigated them. He tells Dongcheol that this is also his last life. Dongcheol says fine. He does not care if he dies, but at least he lets Ah-hyun go. He also says it is okay if Ilwoo takes all the rewards, but please leave Ah-hyun. Ilwoo says he cannot do that. Their drops or mission rewards would be trash anyway. They suddenly hear the roar of a werewolf and Dongcheol gets attacked by him. Ilwoo says they will lose all rationality and fall asleep. He asks werewolves to take these 3 humans as sacrifices. In return, they will receive the offspring to revive their kin. The writings on the moonstone can be interpreted as a person receiving a reward after awakening the moon wolf by offering 3 sacrifices. Ilwoo says everyone was so stupid to believe such a lie. Suddenly, Seonghoon appears from one side and says Ilwoo betrays them. Ilwoo also blames him for dropping that pretense of knowing everything, as he was about to die anyway. He also thinks a warrior would have learned linguistic skills. Seonghoon is pretty loaded. Seonghoon replies that the same applies to him too. Ilwoo comes forward to attack him and says he thought something was off. His movements were that of a rancor. They both fight with each other. Seonghoon knows it is an active variety of martial arts, so Ilwoo is fast and robust. He also thinks it will be hard to defeat him head-on. It would be a pain if he had 2 lives and returned too. Seonghoon also thinks about it. He stabs the left shoulder of Ilwoo, who feels immense pain and ponders that Seonghoon looks fine because he was not expecting him to be strong, as the poison should have seeped into his whole body by now, slowing him down. That means Seonghoon did not eat that soup. But Ilwoo could not believe this because he saw everyone eating it. He says that means Seonghoon neutralizes the poison somehow. Seonghoon continues attacking him brutally, and soon Ilwoo falls. Seonghoon grabs him and says he can't die yet. He brings him in front of Moon Wolf and asks him to eat his body. He observes it was Ilwoo's first life and thinks it would be a troublesome meeting whenever they meet again. Then he says he will need another sacrifice to offer to the Moon Wolf. He then brings Ahyeon and sacrifices her to the Moon Wolf. He says it was beneficial for him to become affiliated with a rancor magician. He feels sorry for sacrificing Ahyeon, but he has to do this. When Moon Wolf eats her, Seonghoon sees it was also Ahyeon's first life. But she won't remember anything because of the poison. If they meet again, he will have to pretend to be a victim. He then does the same thing with Dongcheol. The status window says the awakening Moon Wolf has become the awakened Moon Wolf. He is bigger than before he awakened, but thanks to Dongcheol, his stamina should have dropped a lot. He says he can take him down in the blink of an eye if it is like this. He knows the mission will be completed if he takes down the Moon Wolf and touches the Moonstone. But there is a secret most people do not know about. One can rub the Moon Wolf's blood on the Moonstone and a secret door will open. He says the first time he just narrowly beat the Moon Wolf and came here. The treasure he expected to see was nowhere to be found, and there was only a sarcophagus holding a suspended werewolf. It left him bewildered. With lower-grade linguistics, it will be interpreted as an individual will receive the treasure to revive his kin. But if an individual learns intermediate-grade linguistics, it will be interpreted as an individual will find a comrade that can revive his kin. Seonghoon knows there are 50 non-resistant werewolves. He says there would be 4,000 gold for a werewolf heart and 1,000 for a tooth. It is like 300,000 gold just came flying his way. He kills all 50 werewolves. The status window tells him the moment he took care of the 50 werewolves, his proficiency in intermediate-grade swordsmanship skyrocketed. He believes that betraying people and sacrificing them is a dirty deed, but if he did not do this, then it would be nearly impossible to grow stronger as a swordsman. He then tries to bring Ellie back to her senses. When she wakes up, she asks him what happened. He says Ilwoo betrayed them and also poisoned them all. He also tells her that, unfortunately, both Ahyeon and Dongcheol were too far gone when he came rushing in. She becomes worried on hearing this, and also says thanks to him and says if he would not have come in time, she would have died in vain here. He says no need to thank him, he just did what needed to be done. He then asks her what she thinks about forming a party with him. Ellie starts sharing her life story with him. She says she was born into an arranged marriage. Her mother had already run away, so she had to choose to not die at his violent father's hands. When everyone was sleeping, she placed a coal briquette under the head of the man who drank himself unconscious. Her father passed away at the scene due to a carbon monoxide overdose, and no one ever suspected her. If she just acted naturally, anyone would believe her words. After the start of the mission, she acted seductively and stabbed the knives into the necks of all the men who flocked to her. She says thanks to that, she received the title Cowardly Survivor and was able to survive the world of the mission. She already knew the secret of the Moonstone that the Moon Wolf was guarding, as well as Ilwoo poisoning the food. She was biding her time by pretending to have been poisoned, but the most naive-looking Seonghoon gave Ilwoo a horrible death. After that, he calmly tried to trick her. Seonghoon asks what about forming a party with him. She acted like she had been tricked. She says she has never seen a person like him before. She wanted to know more, so she accepted his offer to form a party with him. On the other side, many people are sitting in the control room of the mission. Height-haired girl says the game is getting too slow now. She says she already told them the people who were participating were too weak to start with. Of course, it is going to be slow. She says the grandfather is the strongest and knows the most, but his head often does not work properly. An old man, Asura, stops her and says to Loki that he won't forgive her rudeness any longer. The white-haired man says if the people are lacking, they need to give them an idea. So it is important to make sure the players are aware of how their strength compares to others. It will probably inspire a sense of rivalry. He says it is time to make a forced endurance mission for every player for a set period. He further says that S-grade difficulty should be good. Another person says that no one will be able to clear it. An old man says do not worry, he knows at least that much. He says he will select Ellie, whose magic foundations are sturdy. Someone says my Rini is alright, and Kang Muhan is also good. Loki, the white-haired girl, says she likes a guy called Yu Seonghoon. Another woman with yellow hair says Seonghoon is the fastest tutorial clear, and she does not know why Loki has picked a human like that. If it were Zac Efron from America, she would get it. Zac Efron has distinguished himself among the rest in the city with the Americans. To describe him in one phrase, he is absolute evil, a psychopath that solely derives fun from slaughter. Loki says she is different from Satan because she wants a slightly different villain. He is a crude villain who is dirty and stingy and only thinks of his immediate gain. That is why she chose Yu Seonghoon. As they discussed, a young man with glasses says he will move forward with the patch. Then, the details of the new patch are told to everyone. The details include the introduction of the ranking system. In this, they will announce the names based on the order of the highest integration of abilities. People will receive rewards monthly based on their rankings. Anyone can change his ranking by participating in